Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Sweet Nothings podcast. Whether this is your first time here or whether you are delightedly returning with hurried pace, this is your home of relaxed, funny, and informative chats all about the love of eating. We'll talk about the latest food trends, some controversial opinions, and all things edible. My name is Kelly, the baker and creator behind Maverick Baking on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all social media you can possibly name, and of course, maverickbaking.com, the source of every sweet recipe you could ever need. In today's episode, we are going to be touching upon a very touched upon subject, but not quite yet. First, it's time to take a look at just what on earth has been trending on social media this month. The biggest kind of TikTok trend I came across this month in the world of food, aside from that guy who makes all things butter and is just an absolute delight to watch. While I typically cannot remember the name of the creator at the moment, search all things butter on TikTok if you are a user and just watch this guy basically turn butter into any sweet or savory flavor you can imagine. I've been a bit obsessed with his content recently, and he's making some very creative and very affordable butter solutions to all your eating problems. Similarly, there has been a huge trend for something called dirty soda on TikTok. Now, this is something that is very new to me, but is apparently born out of the Mormon areas of Utah in the United States. Mostly because I believe, and I do, if the Mormon community have stumbled across this podcast somehow, first of all, my apologies. Second of all, do correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe dirty soda was born somewhat out of necessity, as Mormonism does not permit alcohol, or it does not permit the kind of, excessive alcohol consumption that many of the rest of the world partake in. And similarly, I also don't believe caffeine is a thing for certain branches of Mormonism, and therefore drinks have to, be a bit more exciting sometimes, and thus the dirty soda was born. Now, while unlike a kind of spiked milkshake or dirty milkshake, which usually means that there is alcohol added to something that is typically non-alcoholic, the dirty soda, from what I can understand, is essentially a sweet, fizzy drink that has had some kind of creamy element added to it. Now, I know it gives me vibes of, a mid-20th century Coke float. I think I've tried one once in my life, and that was quite enough, because the combination of kind of creamy and even more sugar with Coca-Cola is just a step too close to things I don't want to be close to personally. But the kind of classic dirty soda that has somehow managed to be just all over TikTok is apparently a combination of Diet Coke, healthy folks, double cream, sugar-free coconut syrup, and lime juice. And there is another popular variety, popular thanks to singer Olivia Rodrigo, whose go-to order is known as the Malibu, which is made of Dr. Pepper, coconut syrup, and vanilla syrup. Now, I think these have been made most famous by a brand called Swig, who own either one soda shop or several soda shops across Utah or the United States. And yeah, I'm interested. I think I would be intrigued enough to try this. I certainly don't think I would make it at home, but it's something that if I saw it on a menu, I might order just out of curiosity. The combination of Diet Coke, heavy cream, coconut syrup, and lime juice does sound incredibly refreshing. It's very warm where I am just now, and the thought of drinking something like that, I can understand how it could be fruity, refreshing, a little bit creamy if soda necessarily isn't your thing by itself. This Dr. Pepper coconut vanilla thing just sounds like an absolutely chaotic concoction of sweetness. Even if these are sugar-free versions of sodas and syrups, that just sounds like too much. That just, to me, it sounds like taking a slab of chocolate, dipping it in chocolate, and then dusting it with cocoa powder. It's not going to be bad in the same way that eating an undressed salad is bad, but, bad in terms of life decisions, perhaps. And people have been making this all over TikTok. And of course, there have then been plenty of articles written by people who've seen it on TikTok and needed something to write an article about. So they wrote an article about things they've seen on TikTok that they've tried. The usual way that social media and journalism tie together these days. But a common theme appears to be, this Diet Coke and coconut, or Diet Coke and double cream variety. I'm certainly interested. I do like the name dirty soda, and I think the combination of, creamy with juice and syrup and fizziness certainly makes sense. It's also, it's almost comedically American when I see things like this. It's like, I feel like something like this couldn't take off as well anywhere else in the world, Just enormous cups of sugar-free, don't forget, fizzy juice with double cream in it. It's like a parody drink, but if you can't have caffeine or alcohol, I kind of understand it. Another trend, a little bit closer to home if you are listening from the UK, where I am from, is of course the inescapable conversation about the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. There's a big Jubilee happening at the moment. I'm not a stan of the Queen, shall we say. So I can't remember the year exactly that we're celebrating of her glorious reign. Cut to this audio clip being played during my treason trial. Anyway, as a result of the Jubilee, of course, there is just Union Jack, bunting, street party chaos everywhere. In terms of advertising, in terms of, the BBC. But the thing that has struck me the most, because you might be thinking, Kelly, why on earth are we talking about the monarchy? This is a food podcast. Get your head back in the game. I would like to, if I hadn't been utterly assaulted by the antics of Marks and Spencer this month. Now, they're becoming a common theme of harassment in my life with their kind of festive things they like to make, whether it was for Valentine's Day, for Easter. They do like to pull some really controversial nonsense out of the bag. Clearly, whoever is in their PR department is doing their job, and I hope they're being, adequately remunerated for it because they deserve it. What I'm talking about is the violence with which M&S have decided to promote their range of edible corgi-based treats. Now, if you are not based within the UK, or if you're just someone who likes to keep themselves out of the Queen's business, the Queen has dogs. These dogs are Welsh corgis. They're tiny, fluffy, short-legged creatures, somewhere between, a horrendous mashup of like a golden retriever and a sausage dog, basically, if you've never seen a corgi before. They are very adorable, and they're also a lot bigger in real life than they should be, in my opinion. But I am a dog lover, so I can understand, the Queen vibing with these in particular. I don't know if she's under some kind of contract to only have this kind of dog, but I think we've only ever seen her, at least for the past, 30 years, with this particular flavour of dog. And speaking of dog flavour, this is the angle that Marks and Spencer have decided to just rinse in their, Jubilee food promotions. Why there are Jubilee food promotions? Again, feel free to tell me, because I don't know the answer. We can all make prawn cocktail sandwiches and coronation chicken something, sit outside as we enjoy a day off because someone was made queen however many years ago. But if you would like to go all out, Marks and Spencer have created, some slightly more innocent products, such as a truckle of cheese, a truckle of cranberry-studded Wensleydale in the shape of a crown. It's about as painfully twee and British as it can possibly be. But then we get into the utterly disturbing. For example, caramel corgi cakes. These are caramel-flavoured cake things with a caramel mousse and sauce and a white chocolate corgi face on top. Why? Why? It could have been anything. It could have been anything. You could have just released the caramel cakes, or, you could have not done that. I don't really know what that has to do with a jubilee of any sort, but these terrifying anthropomorphic dog cake things are available if you would like corgi themed desserts. But it doesn't end there. You can also get corgi biscuits. And while, iced biscuits are an art form, incredibly difficult to make, they're corgi biscuits. They could be truly anything. They could be... For any video viewers, I will put up a picture at the moment if you're watching on YouTube. Otherwise, the Marks & Spencer Food PR Instagram page is, of course, the place to go for some novelty ridiculousness. The corgi biscuits, you look at them and that could be a border collie. That could be a fox. No one is looking at that and going, you know what that is? That is definitely a corgi, and it's definitely a corgi biscuit, and I am definitely going to buy the corgi biscuits. But the most disturbing of all, despite these two corgi-themed treats, is that much like when they stuck a rabbit face on the Colin the Caterpillar, which they are just needlessly hammering home at this point, they've gone and stuck a corgi face on a chocolate caterpillar's body, and I don't even know where to begin. I truly don't know where to begin. The cruel the cruel implications of this kind of behavior. Last month for Easter, they stuck a white chocolate rabbit face on what is typically a chocolate cake shaped like a caterpillar and called Colin. Just listen to that back for me and tell me I don't sound like an utter raving lunatic. And this month they have decided to make, again, a very ambiguous dog face and a little Union Jack thing. And instead of making it a separate chocolate cake or just sticking to the caramel corgi cakes and the ambiguous corgi biscuits, they've put it on the Colin the Caterpillar cake body. And they're selling that as a thing. I was going to make a pun about the fact that Britain as a nation is going to the dogs, but it's too easy. It's too easy. It's just bizarre. It's truly bizarre. It's like peak social media marketing pain. And it's working because it gets me talking about it every month. I can't keep my eyes off of this PR page. You're probably all very tired of me talking about it, but the thought of special edition Jubilee food is abstract enough, let alone putting the Queen's dog's face on a caterpillar. I need to move on now. Aside from the food trends of this month, there has been some juicy news thanks to people like Jamie Oliver and big Boris Johnson again this month. The eternal, never-ending and painful junk food debate drama has arisen yet again in the United Kingdom, and it's just all over the news. While we are not talking about calorie counts on menus this time or anything to do with school dinners, Jamie Oliver... Again, I don't even know where to begin. Jamie Oliver arranged a protest outside of the Prime Minister's residence in London, here in the UK, number 10 Downing Street. I also believe the Prime Minister wasn't even there at the time. I could be wrong, but if that is true, this is even funnier. And he had asked everyone who attended the protest to bring along an Eton mess. An Eton mess, again, if you're not familiar, is a cream-based dessert with crushed meringues and berries, usually strawberries, I believe, all swirled up together into a mess created at the very, very elusive school of Eton here in the United Kingdom, which has had previous attendees, such as Prime Ministers like David Cameron and currently Boris Johnson. So Jamie Oliver, completely unrelated to the topic at hand, decided to take down shop-bought Eton mess desserts and call Boris Johnson an Eton mess outside of 10 Downing Street. Now, the class clash that exists in the United Kingdom has long been a thing and is becoming more and more of a thing as the wealth gap pushes us further and further apart. But despite his roots in working class life, Jamie Oliver is now an incredibly successful multi-millionaire with like 5 kids, several businesses, several large businesses, likely several homes, books all over the place, always on TV doing something, and yet he seems to miss the mark almost all the time. Bless him. He used to do some fantastic cooking shows. He taught a lot of people in the United Kingdom how to cook. We cannot ignore that. But there is a certain chunk of hypocrisy when it comes to, declaring Boris Johnson's privilege when he is not exactly someone who's in the same position as most people in the United Kingdom just now. A lot of people have criticised Jamie Oliver for this protest because what he's actually protesting about is the postponement of some measures against what is known as the obesity crisis in a time when most people cannot afford to heat their homes and eat dinner on the same day. It's an interesting and controversial point of debate for some people and a point of, just tragic reality for most. Essentially what he was protesting is that the measures that had been agreed by the UK Parliament should be brought in sooner, if not immediately. Measures, for example, being TV ads for junk food, quote unquote, would be banned before 9 p.m. and only allowed to be shown again after 5:30 a.m. This period is known as the watershed here in the UK. And the idea being that children will not see these adverts for junk food. So this could be anything like McDonald's Happy Meals or Cadbury chocolate bars. Even sweetened yogurts, I believe, would be considered something that couldn't be advertised between this time. How effective this will be is a completely different matter. Do correct me if I'm wrong, but how many children are sitting and actively watching daytime TV nowadays? I mean, most are obviously at school for the vast majority of the day. And I imagine nowadays, would take more to free entertainment from platforms like YouTube or perhaps even from some relatively affordable streaming services such as Netflix or Disney Plus. I could be wrong. Maybe there are still plenty of children watching TV, and perhaps children are influenced by adverts. But, is that then the deciding factor in junk food being purchased for a household? I don't know. Similarly, adults will still see adverts post-watershed if they watch normal TV. Will this make a difference in their purchasing habits? Probably not. And similarly, is there anything inherently wrong with the advertising of these foods? Because many people enjoy these foods as part of a healthy diet, as part of recovery from eating disorders, etc., etc. They're quick and easy options for lots of people. Not everything has to be tailored towards losing weight, but sadly our country is a little bit obsessed with it. And another measure that I believe is still going ahead is placement of junk food in supermarkets being altered, essentially. So instead of being at like the eye line of children, junk food will be placed much higher or much lower on the shelf so that it is not at the kind of immediate view of people passing through the supermarket. Again, how much of a change this will make, I don't know. And Jamie Oliver protesting it. Is this the right issue to protest at the moment when so many people can barely afford to eat, let alone to make decisions on, junk food multi-buy offers and junk food advertising, junk food placement in supermarkets? I don't know. But that has been some of the big, juicy food news at the moment. Do let me know your thoughts. If you follow me on social media or if you're watching this via YouTube, do let me know your thoughts and comments, messages, even emails if you like. It's a really multi-sided kind of issue, and it just seems to come up every single month in some form or another. So I'd be interested to hear another point of view. But on a slightly lighter note, shall we get into what is going to be, thanks to a lovely YouTube commenter, the main meat of today's episode. Recently, I asked you guys for some questions because I wanted to film a Q&A video, which I am currently in the process of filming, and it will be uploaded very shortly. If you are listening to this just now, it will probably be uploaded, if not at the end of May, then at the start of June. And you guys, as always, delivered wonderfully. Thank you so much for any kind of contributions, questions, anything like that. Not only because it creates a very interesting Q&A video when it does appear, but also because one of these questions has given me the entire subject for today's podcast, which is the almost age-old question of, if you were hosting a dinner party and you could invite guests, famous, living, dead, historical figures, who are you inviting? Who are your dream dinner party guests? And today, not only am I answering that question because it's one I've actually never thought about, despite it being a very popular, subject of discussion. They also asked my dream kind of menu for this occasion and the dream entertainment. But we're going to take it a step even further today in discussing also our nightmare dinner party guests, our nightmare menu, and our nightmare entertainment, because it's almost more enjoyable. My dream dinner party guests, after much thought last night, I feel like a lot of people go with very controversial figures. They want to ask questions to people like Adolf Hitler, to Joseph Stalin, people who have led horrific but very interesting lives, and they would like to know more about just what on earth made them that way. And I understand that. Similarly, when I asked my husband, Francesco, this question, for example, he wanted to speak to influential human beings such as Henry Ford, such as Albert Einstein, just to get a deep insight into these revolutionary and incredibly interesting people. Me personally, I'm not going to pretend that I'm attending a dinner party to learn anything or to be depressed or to have an argument, because it's all too easy to do that. And at my dream dinner party, that would not be the kind of conversation I would like to have. So my dream dinner party guests that I'm about to present to you are essentially chefs, alcoholics, and the LGBTQ community, if not all three combined. Number one, who I would always allow an extra seat to my table for, is Miss Nigella Lawson. She has been an enormous, enormous influence on my life. I think she's an incredible, incredible woman. Her life has been fascinating. She's someone who truly paints pictures with her words, along with the fact that she is just stupidly attractive, both in her way of speaking and her physical appearance. She is a family woman. She's a cook and always emphasizes that rather than being a chef. She's informative, despite, being this sort of icon of posh. She's also very down to earth sometimes when it comes to her cooking methods. She seems like a non-judgmental person. She seems like an incredibly intelligent person. And, she's great at eating as well as she is at cooking. And that is what you want in a dinner party guest, if you ask me. Second seat on the table is going to be Sir Elton John. It's not like I am Elton John's biggest fan, absolutely not. There are other musicians who I listen to much, much more. But when you think of musicians who would just have uncontroversially incredible life experience and gossip, let's not gloss over, Elton John must absolutely be one of them. I did consider Freddie Mercury, but I feel like he would be much more of a tragic guest. And as wild and fun as he would likely be, Elton John has lived such a long and full life, so talented, so many experiences, good and bad. I think he would just be great pair to have at the table, basically. Following up, someone else from the food world, perhaps not a surprise, especially considering the quote above me, if you're watching on video at the moment, Mr. Anthony Bourdain. would be endlessly welcome at my dinner table. I have only read 2 of his published books and seen a handful of his TV shows, but he's someone that is incredibly, incredibly admirable for me. He's a man who appeared to make a lot of mistakes in his life, but to learn from those mistakes. And he seems like someone who lived multiple lives in terms of being a chef, being a TV star, being a writer, all of these things. And I also think he would just be very funny and very nice to eat with. Following up, an almost entirely separate personality, Miss Dolly Parton is going to be on my dream dinner party guest list. Because again, when thinking of, influential and creative people who'd be just great company, Dolly Parton's up there. She's done some wonderful things with her life. Again, a wonderfully full, varied and long life. And she's just someone that I think everyone adores. And she seems lovely. And I'd love to see if she looks as fantastic in person too. And finally, on our table, because food is, of course, my main interest in life, and it appears strange not to have another influential person in food at the table, Keith Floyd is who I would like to invite. Obviously, again, a troubled soul, unfortunately, no longer with us, but what an absolute character and an absolute talent when it came not only to cooking, but the utter chaos of his cooking shows, and also sounding like an incredibly eloquent and well-educated man at the same time. And I think those 5 people, perhaps not with me, they really don't need me there, but perhaps I think those 5 people would not only be great to be around, but would be great to be with together, if that makes sense. So that is my campy, nerdy table, my dream dinner party. Dream 3 courses. I think it only makes sense to begin with my absolute favorite thing that is always at the wrong end of the menu, in my opinion, which is a cheese board. A cheese board, as far as I'm concerned, should not be a dessert. Dessert is dessert. It is sweet. People who don't like dessert should not be eating cheese boards. They should be eating nothing. Or they should be having the cheese board at the beginning, because it makes sense. It's a perfect little salty, fatty appetizer. And it's so delicious. And no other starter could ever compare, in my opinion. So a cheese board would allow fantastic variety, plenty to talk about between our guests. And I want cheeses from everywhere. I want the Italian, I want the British, I want the French, I want everything. The main course, for no apparent reason, I just think it would be great fun at a dinner party, is the full Christmas dinner with all the trimming, the full roast turkey, the roast potatoes, the gravy, the parsnips, everything. I thought about a lasagna, but it just doesn't really seem to fit the bill. Christmas dinner is my favourite meal of the year, and it would be my dream dinner party main course, followed by, for dessert, any kind of chocolate hazelnut cake. Anything super rich, super heavy, super chocolatey, and super hazelnutty. I'm not fussy otherwise. And the dream entertainment, I didn't put a lot of thought into, because I would honestly be entertained enough with those people there. But if we could get Elton and Dolly to throw something together just before dessert, I think that would be just fine. As for my nightmare dinner party guests, this is where things could get potentially a little bit more controversial, but I have my reasons, and this is my nightmare. It doesn't have to be anyone else's nightmare, but it would be my nightmare. My number 1 nightmare dinner party guest would be Boris Johnson. Having him knock at the door, hearing a knock at the door, opening it and seeing Boris Johnson ever, let alone now, after everything that's happened over the past 3 years. I'm not delving into politics much here. Let's just say it would be a nightmare, especially to have him then sit down at the table. Following him through the door would be Gillian McKeith. Gillian McKeith, if you are outside of the UK, was this incredibly unreasonable, nutrition-obsessed TV star. I think she's a doctor. I think she might actually be a medical doctor or some kind of doctor. She had this show originally in the UK called You Are What You Eat, in which she would just basically roast people's diet, call them, scum for eating chips occasionally. And she would even make them poo into plastic containers before examining it at great length and telling them every incorrect decision they'd ever made in their lives just through examining that. You might call that entertainment. We certainly did in approximately, the year 2004. Different time. Gillian McKeith then sort of went even more downhill and just became a bit nuts, and it just is never really enjoyable to watch, and I think she would just be one of the worst people to eat with because she would make you feel terrible about yourself. Following Miss Gillian McKeith through the door is America's worst voice, Ben Shapiro. Again, I don't have to get politics involved here, but his voice could melt steel. And I just don't want to feed him anything. Following him through the door, again, my politics are exposing themselves. But if we're on the subject of unbearable voices and people I wouldn't be particularly welcoming towards, Margaret Thatcher is going to be following Ben Shapiro through the door. Of course, her and Boris would get on fine, but it would be unbearable conversation. So she's not welcome either. And finally, just because I think things are a little bit too political and a bit too jokey so far, so we need someone who would genuinely be a nightmare to have in your home. And my brain couldn't help but think, Ted Bundy. Because the the others, while you would be in heated debate about matters of politics, matters of ethics, matters of human rights, if you will, and Gillian McKeith would just sort of be annoying as she pushed anything but raw vegetables around her plate. Ted Bundy would really keep you on the edge of your seat. You know what I mean? You would, no one would feel comfortable. And of course, there's just the very real risk that you might not wake up the next day if you invited him. So I think he is the true definition of a nightmare dinner party guest. Continuing on to what would make such a hellish and uncomfortable and terrifying evening even worse, some terrifying food. The starter for me that would be an absolute nightmare would be spring rolls, the kind of fresh Thai-style spring rolls or the Vietnamese-style spring rolls you get in that squidgy rice paper stuffed with lots of fresh coriander. They look beautiful, incredibly nutritious, probably incredibly refreshing. Of course, they're normally served with a delicious peanut or chili dip, but the thought of consuming the squidgy rice paper and that much fresh coriander makes me deeply upset. Just a personal nightmare. That would be then followed by an incredibly large, unseasoned and undressed salad with just an unreasonable amount of red onion. Raw red onion. Cooked red onion is an absolutely essential ingredient in many dishes, and raw red onion does have its place. But when you get those salads that you can then taste in your mouth for over 24 hours afterwards, nightmare. And my nightmare dessert would be just a bowl of licorice-flavoured sweets, like licorice all sorts, or that wild salted Scandinavian licorice. There's no place for it. And the thought of having to pick through a bowl of licorice while being stared down by Ted Bundy and listening to the political musings of Margaret Thatcher, Ben Shapiro and Boris Johnson, it's nightmare fuel. And to make it worse, I believe the absolute peak nightmare entertainment that could be provided would be if one of them grabbed a ukulele and played literally anything. Literally anything. Even if they didn't sing with it, ukulele music makes me not joyous. So those would be my dream dinner party and my nightmare dinner party attendees, menus, and entertainment picks. But I'm afraid on this lighter note, that is where I am going to wrap up for today. Thank you so much, as always, for listening to the Sweet Nothings podcast. I hope you have enjoyed having said sweet nothings whispered in your ear. If there are any topics in particular you'd like to hear covered in future that haven't been covered already, do let me know. Get in touch via email, via social media, anything like that. I'm always open to new ideas. And of course, if you would like to support the Sweet Nothings podcast or Maverick Baking as a whole, do feel free to do so via Patreon. Even for donations as little as $1 a month, you help support all of these creations immensely. And you'll get exclusive access to content you can't find anywhere else and early access to podcast episodes. So do consider it if that's the kind of thing you like to consider. But until next time, Thank you so much for listening. As always, it really, really means a lot, especially if you stay this long. And I will see you for the next one.